Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So the point behind today's class is really to give you a basis kind of to go off of when you're starting to work in designs and command. Because the first thing that you really need to know as a real estate agent is that you are a business. And because you are a business, you are a brand, right? Branding and business really tend to go hand in hand. Any of the major businesses that we know and love, they have a really strong brand identity. And just as you as a real estate agent, you should really grow that brand identity as well. And not to overwhelm you, and of course it doesn't mean that you're going to have like Super Bowl ad campaigns or fancy graphic designers or anything like that, but it's just starting with your value proposition that you're going to be bringing to your clients and relaying that messaging into your branding and into your designs. Because when you go into the Command Design Center, you'll see all these beautiful templated designs, and that's amazing, but it's also about knowing which one of those templates, if you're going to be working from a template, that really speaks to your brand identity, and knowing that will help you stay consistent and make your marketing really effective, because it's all about not wasting your time, right? You don't want to be creating these things from scratch or even just spending time editing some of the designs in Command only to have a poor effect on your end consumer or not make a big impact on them. So really knowing your value proposition and then incorporating that into your designs and into your marketing is really, really important actually as a business. And as you'll see, you know, some of the challenges I think that we have as real estate agents, and I'm sure you've seen this just in kind of hearing or seeing what other real estate agents are doing, is that the really good ones have consistent marketing, right? And their branding, like everything kind of looks the same. All their designs have a certain aesthetic. All their photos are done probably by the same photographer, right? They all look sort of similar. Even sometimes their listings, right, start to look very similar. They start to have a certain aesthetic or a certain feel, or they're in a certain area. So as you'll see, and it starts to make sense, that building a brand is really about consistency, and it's about a point of view. And that starts with your value proposition. So as a real estate agent, what do you bring to the table that's unique to other real estate agents? Is it that you really love to corner the first-time home buyers market? So you really, really know how to guide people from A to Z in a transaction, and you thrive on teaching people and holding their hand through a transaction? Or is it that you're the negotiator, that you close deals at a better price for your clients than any other agent, and you have a negotiation certification? Is that really your value proposition? Or is it that you just really get to know your clients really well, and you end up really finding that it's like you're a friend for life or an advisor for life? So just understanding your value proposition first, and that's a different class that we'll have in July on value propositions and branding. But understanding that and workshopping that and understanding how to relay that into your designs is actually very important. So now, how do we connect those two? How do we connect the value proposition to the actual design itself? Well, that's done through a lot of different ways, right? How do we communicate anything in life and anything that we see online or in any sort of media? It's copy, so actually what's written with the marketing. It's your tone of voice, it's your, so to speak, you know, as you're typing. It's the words that you choose, how long your sentences are, if you use exclamation points or whatever punctuation you use. So it's your tone of voice in the copy around the marketing. It's photos, the photos that you choose to use. Are you using like the same picture of the house, like from the same viewpoint every time in all of your marketing? Maybe you are, maybe it's a really unique point of view. So that's a really cool thing to use for your designs. Is it that you're using specific color palettes? Like, as we know, Coca-Cola, what is their color palette? It's red and silver, or red and black, or red, white, and black. It's a very limited color palette, and we all know it by heart. So is that what you're going to go with in your designs? And just so you know, being at Keller Williams, you have a really unique advantage to this, because even though we have a strong brand as KW with our red and our black and, you know, white, and that's our Keller Williams brand, but that doesn't have to be your brand. So one of the advantages of being at Keller Williams is you can take your brand anywhere you want it to go. You can say that you are like the queen of the mountaintop real estate and have mountains in your logo and, you know, crowns and whatever you want. You can really brand yourself completely separately from Keller Williams and just have the Keller Williams logo kind of in the background to distinguish that they're your brokerage of choice. But you don't have to stay in line with our branding completely like you do in some other brokerages. So it's a real advantage that you have to communicate your brand and your value proposition. You can almost think of yourself as like a brokerage within a brokerage, you know, in the way that you're branding yourself. So it's a really fun exercise if you spend the time to think about it and to build this out. So that is kind of how the branding and the value proposition leads into your designs and your choices. So just to kind of step back, let's go into sort of the basics of branding, and we're going to watch a short video on what are the top 9 things that you need to have as a brand. So let's look at branding basics here. Any questions so far? Serena, do you have any questions?
Corinne, I'm good. As I said,
Okay.
I'm just watching the time.
Sure, no problem. All right, so I'm going to share my screen so we can watch this video together.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Oh, sorry. The wrong one. They were switched on me. I apologize.
It's okay.
Copied them.
Listen, you still, I have trouble moving from one thing to the other all the time.
I just copied the same video twice by accident. Here we go. Here's the right one. Okay.
I don't hear his voice.
Oh, really? Okay. Interesting. Let's see if I guess I can try to take it off of this.
So branding and personal branding
now?
is a really complicated subject, and I'm going to talk about a very small piece of it today. I'm going to talk about 9 design elements that you need to build a personal brand. Brand design is a lot more than a logo. Logos are really important. Everybody has a logo. My plumber has a logo. Logos are only a very small piece of it. There are 10 zillion logos in the world. So if you design a logo, that's great, but you've got a lot more work to do. The brand design elements I'm going to talk about today are part of brand ecosystem. So your brand ecosystem, your brand, the visual aspect of your brand is going to show up in a lot of places. And I call these places brand touch points. They're places like your website or email or print or broadcast, e-commerce, social media, video, digital marketing. There are a million places where your brand is going to show up. And you want to make sure that your brand shows up in a very consistent way across all of these brand touch points. So now let's dive into it. What are the 9 elements of a brand design ecosystem? First of all, we have the logo. So you want to have a logo. It should be simple. It should probably have 1 or 2 colors in it. Very few logos have more than 3 colors, so keep it simple. Number 2, fonts. You want to choose a font or 2 fonts for your brand. Generally, a main font. This could be the font that actually appears in your brand identity or logo, and a secondary font. Fonts have personalities, so there are serif fonts and sans serif fonts. There are personality fonts or handwritten fonts. The font says a lot about your brand, so be very thoughtful and very careful when you choose the fonts that are going to be associated in a very consistent way with your brand. Number 3, color palette. Color has an incredible psychological power. Colors mean things. So you want to develop a color palette for your brand. Lots of brand color palettes have maybe 3 to 4, maybe 5 colors in them. So you want to develop a brand color palette that speaks a lot about the psychology and the strategy behind what it is that you do and what it is that you offer. And color is going to speak to your consumer, to your customer avatar. So you don't want to think about just the color that you personally like, but what is the color that your customer is going to respond to? What are they going to like? Think about it in terms of your end consumer. Number 4 is pattern and texture. A lot of people forget about pattern and texture, but this is a key design element that can be leveraged to be able to recognize you and your brand when people come across you, like the Louis Vuitton pattern that happens on all of their bags, or the brushed metal that Apple uses. These are very recognizable textures and patterns that they use consistently to great effect to help people recognize their brands. Number 5 is photography and animation. There are a million photography styles out there, and choosing one style and using it consistently across all of your brand touch points can really help solidify how your brand is recognized when people come across it in your brand ecosystem and across all of your brand touch points. So think about developing or choosing a photography style. Number 6, illustration and iconography. Just like photography, there are a million illustration styles out there and iconography styles out there. By choosing one that goes along with your brand and sings with your logo and your visual elements, your color palette, etc., using that really consistently, it can be a way to establish a vocabulary for your brand that becomes really recognizable. Number 7, this is one that very few people kind of think about a lot of the time, but sound is a way that you can brand yourself. Think about Intel and their Intel Inside sound. It goes bum, 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 and whenever you hear that, you think Intel Inside. Intel uses sound as a branding element. Number 8 is layout. Using a particular type of layout or style of layout consistently across all of your brand touchpoints is another great way to establish a strong brand vocabulary that people will be able to recognize. Number 9, another one that people kind of don't think about a lot is tone of voice. So in the copy on your website or in the copy of your tweets or in the copy of your writing, what is your brand voice? What does your brand sound like? What kind, is it formal? Is it jokey? Is it informal? Is it funny? Is it serious? What is the voice of your brand? Think about the tone of voice of your brand. And this is a bonus, personal style. I did a separate video on personal style branding, which you can check out. But personal style is a way that if you use a style element consistently on your person, hairstyle, glasses, a hat, the way you dress, hair color, you can use, if done consistently, personal style to establish a really strong brand element. And once you have all these elements together.
Okay, so I'm just gonna plug my headphones back in here. So obviously, not every single one of those brand elements is necessarily going to translate at this point as just one single agent or as a small team to all the things that you need to do as a brand. But I think that this elevates your thought process around how you're communicating with your clients in terms of your social media marketing, your postcard marketing, anything you're doing for events, anything that on your profiles when you're being, you know, when someone Googles you, where do they find you and what does that brand look like when they look you up? I think this can really separate you from the competition, right? Not to say that we're not all collaborative and we don't work together, but there are a lot of real estate agents and many in probably the area that you do work in, and you really want to elevate yourself, of course, digitally, but also just in the interactions that you're having with your clients as you're working with them so that they can recognize you and remember you also and recommend you better. So it kind of all works together and solidifies in their mind that, oh, you know, Megan was such a great real estate agent. I really recognize it instantly when it's like her listing or when it's her talking to me on social media. And that makes me remember her more when somebody asks me about real estate. I'm going to recommend Megan and not maybe somebody else. So that these elements are really important. And yes, this is an elevated concept maybe to think about further down the line when you're really establishing yourself in the industry. But at the very beginning, even as an agent that's just starting out, it's really important to start to think about what is your brand? And by that, I mean, really, what is your value proposition and how are you relaying that through your branding? So some examples, as I mentioned, of value proposition are the way that you interact with your clients, any advantages that you can give them if you specialize in a certain area. These are all elements of your brand proposition, your value proposition, apologies. So Susan, or Serena, I apologize. What do you say if a client is asking you, you know, what makes you the best real estate agent in your region?
Basically, I feel that I have the connection with my clients and I'm with them and explain the details every step of the way. And I listen to them carefully and I really, work with them versus just telling them what they should do.
Right.
And all my past clients, I have kept in touch with most of my past clients, and many of us have become friends afterwards because I keep my, them close with me, when I'm doing a deal with them, and I keep in touch afterwards. I'm giving them that personal attention.
Yeah,
I think that's my main thing. I give them that personal attention because I'm not doing that many deals a year. That's not where I'm going. That's not what I want to do. I want to be involved with them every step of the way.
That's wonderful. So it sounds like if you were going to think about how to translate that maybe into some marketing or branding, you really would come across as very friendly, very relatable, very kind, very understanding. So these are like the key characteristics that you naturally bring to your clients and when you're working with them. So it's about translating that over into like he said, the font that you use. So what's like a friendly font? I know that these are kind of like abstract concepts, but it actually can really start to build a business that's even bigger for you, or just to cementing your position in people's minds after you finish working with them, so that your brand becomes as recognizable as your face, right? It's sort of like the same thing, like real estate agents really brand themselves with their photo, which makes total sense. But what if the choice of colors and the choice of font and the choice of like your tone was just as valuable as your image, right? In terms of branding for you. And I think what he also said at the end for personal style branding, that is so important for real estate agents, right? Like, do you wear your hair a certain way consistently? And kind of if you think about it, like maybe all the top producers in your region, they kind of do have a personal branded style, right? Like maybe they wear the same type of big necklace every time, or they have this certain like red glasses, or they're always like on a horse or something. Like that is their personal style. And that's really a huge part of their branding, because real estate is a lot about, as I'm sure you agree, like it's a lot about lifestyle. So people that are naturally attracted to certain people that emulate the kind of lifestyle maybe that they want if they're a buyer, or the type of person that they think would sell the home that they live in currently. So people are just naturally attracted to those types of things in seeking, especially a real estate agent, because it's such a personal transaction. So I think that's really great, Serena. It sounds like you really know your client and you know yourself and what value you bring them. So how does this translate into marketing your designs? So we're going to watch another video, just a short video on graphic design basics, because this is so important. Like even knowing, okay, I understand that my brand is that I'm very personable and that I bring a lot of value for life to my clients in terms of friendships. If you're not marketing yourself well aesthetically, other people might not be able to receive that message well. So it's about making the message as clear as possible. And that comes back to very basic, like graphic design basics. So we're just going to watch this one. And Serena, feel free to leave whenever you need to.
I'm going to have to run out, but I'm going to send you a message. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. So.
Are the basis of every visual medium, from fine art to modern web design. Even small details, like the fonts that make up most compositions. What do these examples have in common? Some very basic elements, including line, shape, form, texture, and balance. They might not seem like much on their own, but together, they're part of almost everything we see and create. The fundamentals can be intimidating, especially if you don't consider yourself an artist. However, there's a lot they can teach you about working with different assets and creating simple visuals from scratch. Let's start at the beginning with one of the most basic elements of all, the line. A line is a shape that connects two or more points. It can be fat or thin, wavy or jagged. Every possibility gives the line a slightly different feel. Lines appear frequently in design, for example, in drawings and illustrations, and graphic elements like textures and patterns. They're also common in text compositions, where they can add emphasis, divide or organize content, or even guide the viewer's eye. When working with lines, pay attention to things like weight, color, texture, and style. These subtle qualities can have a big impact on the way your design is perceived. Look for places where lines are hiding in plain sight, for example in text. Even here, experimenting with different line qualities can give you very different results. A shape is any two-dimensional area with a recognizable boundary. This includes circles, squares, triangles, and so on. Shapes fall into two distinct categories: geometric, or regular, and organic, where the shapes are more free-form.
Okay.
Shapes are a vital part of communicating ideas visually. They give images heft and make them recognizable. We understand street signs, symbols, and even abstract art largely because of shapes. Shapes have a surprising number of uses in everyday design. They can help you organize or separate content, create simple illustrations, or just add interest to your work. Shapes are important because they're the foundation of so many things. Learn to look for them in other designs, and soon you'll start seeing them everywhere. When a shape becomes 3D, we call it a form. Forms can be three-dimensional and exist in the real world, or they can be implied, using techniques like light, shadow, and perspective to create the illusion of depth. In two-dimensional design, form makes realism possible. Without it, a bouncing rubber ball is just a circle. A 3D building is just a series of rectangles. Even flat designs use subtle techniques to hint at form and depth. In everyday compositions, the purpose of form is the same, but on a smaller scale. For example, a simple shadow can create the illusion of layers, or give an object a sense of place. Basic forms can bring a touch of realism to your work, a powerful tool when used in moderation. Texture is the physical quality of a surface. Like form, it can be three-dimensional, something you can see and touch, or it can be implied, suggesting that it would have texture if it existed in real life. In design, texture adds depth and wise flat images. Objects can appear smooth, rough, hard, or soft, depending on the elements at play. For beginners, textures make great background images and can add a lot of interest to your work. Look closely, and you may find texture in unexpected places, like distressed fonts and smooth, glossy icons. Just be careful not to go overboard. Too much texture in a single design can quickly become overwhelming. Balance is the equal distribution of visual weight. In other words, how much any one thing attracts the viewer's eye. Balance can be affected by many things, including color, size, number, and negative space. Mastering balance can be tricky for beginners because it does take some intuition. Luckily, the design world is full of examples that can help you understand its different iterations. Symmetrical designs are the same or similar on both sides of an axis. They feel balanced because each side is effectively the same, if not identical. Asymmetrical designs are different, but the weight is still evenly distributed. The composition is balanced because it calls attention to the right things. Many people use a strategy called the rule of thirds. This imagines your work area divided into a 3x3 grid. The focal point of the image is placed on or near one of these lines, creating visual balance with the rest of the space. We find this type of composition appealing because, according to studies, the human eye naturally follows this path when scanning a design. The fundamentals of design are all about the bigger picture. In other words, learning to appreciate the many small details that make up every composition. This insight can be applied to almost any type of project, whether you're creating your own graphics or just looking for simple ways to enhance your work. Thanks for joining us for the fundamentals of design. Check out the rest of our design topics, including color, typography, and
I think that that is very valuable, especially if you're a beginner. Sorry. Especially if you're a beginner to graphic design, this can be really valuable to you just in terms of also analyzing what designs are presented to you. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go into the command designs now to see what they have there. Okay. So here's the design center. And if you don't know, it's this little almost pen and paper icon here, designs. And in here, it's really a great resource because when you create a design, often designs will template that design based upon the channel that it's going to go out on. So whether it's going to be a landing page design, a social media design for print, etc. So let's do a social media design because that's what many of us are concerned about these days. Okay. Okay, so we're going to look at a few designs that Keller Williams is offering, and just do a little bit of analysis based upon the graphic design basics that we just learned about to see if they're actually good designs or what you might need to add to them or subtract for them to make them actually a really good design, or what essential elements they have features. So for example, I think that this is a really good simple one to look at as an example. So as you can see here, and I'll zoom in a little bit. This design is very simple, right? Maybe too simple. So where does your eye go? That's really the main thing for graphic design. The fundamentals are, where does the design bring your eye? So by that, I mean, is your attention focused, or what message are you getting from the design, and are you getting that message effectively? That's really the goal of any good graphic design, is that you're getting the message effectively and efficiently as possible. So for this one, you are getting the message pretty efficiently, right? I'm making a move and here's your face. And here is the Keller Williams office logo. But what can we add to this to make it an even better design? I think actually moving this down, I'm making a move and moving it down and then coupling it with moving this up would actually make it a better design, just because there's a lot of what we call negative space. Oh, having problems with designs here. You don't want, negative space is important, which means by negative space, I mean like area where there is no design, so to speak. So that is important, but it's not really that important. You really need to balance negative space with positive space, with space that has design elements in it. So for example, let's look at this design here. I think that this is an effective design because of the balance that it has. So we're just gonna see if we can view this bigger. Okay. So this design is effective for several reasons, I think. So it effectively has a message that's, especially with the font, what is the font saying? To me, the font is kind of saying that it's a little bit expensive with the serif font, which means that it has like these little tails at the end of it. It's a little bit more elevated, maybe traditional, but you know, very like high quality. For example, the New York Times uses Times New Roman serif font. So it speaks to some intellectual level, that it's like kind of traditional, established, that kind of thing. So I think that does an effective job. And then it's coupled with this sans serif font here that's more informational, that would just, so that's very easy to read, which I think is important when you're doing any kind of smaller fonts. Usually a sans serif, one without the tails, is a more effective way to communicate information because it's not so crowded in the line. And then also just the basic design here with this line, as we heard in that video, the lines are really distinct, right? There's these like broken lines, this kind of modern zigzaggy line. So to me, this is saying that this is modern yet traditional, that it's sleek, you know, And maybe what kind of buyer is this attracting? You know, it's $950,000, so we would expect it to attract, you know, maybe somebody who is an intellectual or has a really wonderful, you know, can afford this type of luxury or this level of, you know, class in a home. That's kind of what it's exceptional and unexpected. So that's what it's communicating to me, right? It's like modern and trendy with these zigzaggy lines, but it's also very traditionally like luxurious. So I think this is a really good design. Now, is it a little bit busy? Is there like a lot going on and it's not really necessarily like bam right in your face with the messaging? Sure, it might be a little bit busy, but I think that for a real estate flyer, sometimes having multiple photos obviously of a property can be helpful. If it was a showing sheet, for example, if you had an open house, this could be a nice one to take away. Would I use this online? No, probably not, right? Because when we're on social media or in our email or something, our brains are going like this, and we're really only attracted to those designs that are very bold and very simple. If you think about, I always think about, I don't know who can relate to this, but some social media posts that's a cliche is a person with like a very bright colored article of clothing that's not a natural color like red or yellow in a beautiful landscape, right? Because it's so distinct to the rest of the landscape, your eye instantly goes to that color and that article of clothing, and you're immediately communicated that, wow, this person is just within nature. And it's I guess you know what type of social media I consume, but it's just a very effective message, right? And it's very attractive to the eye. So that's what I think about in social media marketing that you're doing. You want it to be very clear and very attractive and sticky to the eye. And this is just a little bit too busy for social media, but does it make a good showing sheet? Sure, because it's clear, it has some additional photos of the property. It has a feeling with some texture, and the texture of the font and the style of the font is communicating a certain message, and then also some basic information here. So what type of tone does she have here with even these bullet points? Gourmet kitchen, right? Gourmet, what does that say? It says that it's luxurious and exceptional, you know, as she says here. Secluded, that's kind of a rare thing, right? That's maybe an exceptional aspect of the property. Welcoming yet impressive, so it's, you know, kind of trendy, so welcoming maybe a little bit more, but it's impressive, it's exceptional, so it's unexpected and exceptional. So I think that you see how important this messaging really becomes and how it builds off of each other. It builds off of itself really to put across this message of what this home is really about, and also creating the environment where the right buyer is going to land on this home. And that's what marketing is really about. It's like, it's not about appealing to everybody, it's about appealing to the right person, the person that really should buy this home, or the person that you want to buy this home, or, you know, the client that you want to attract. That's what marketing is for. It's not appealing to everybody. So that's an important thing to remember, because as an agent, you really want the clients that are going to work best with you to be the ones that are most attracted to you. So again, lush outdoor area, lush, exceptional. So I think that and then also this is interesting, right? To contact me for details or to schedule a private tour. So she doesn't just say a showing or contact me to see this property. It's a private tour. So the language that you use and the way that you're marketing yourself follows your value proposition, right? So maybe her value proposition is that to her selling clients, right? So that she is a great marketer. I would think that that's probably part of her value proposition, if this is the way she's talking about this property effectively, that she's great at marketing, that she really understands your property. She knows how to position the property well. So that could be her value proposition. Or also that she, you know, her personal branding is that, she, you know, as you can see from her photo, at least the one that they used here, she's very well groomed, you know, she's very clean cut. She looks like somebody that would, you know, her personal branding is consistent with this type of home sale. So these are all the things that you kind of want to keep in mind when you're thinking about yourself, how you're presenting yourself, and also the properties and how you're marketing your properties. It all plays into one another. Okay, so let's look at another design here. So this one's interesting, I think, if we can view this one. And we'll just do one or two of these and see if we can view this. Okay. So this is pretty bold, right? I think that's the best message that I'm receiving from it. I don't know if you would agree. Please ignore the fact that this logo, first and foremost, should be a transparent JPEG or PNG. It should not have this background. So please make sure that you have the proper logos, that your market center is providing you with the proper ones so that it looks professional. This does not look professional, having a white logo with a white background on top of color. You really want to make sure when you're doing this type of marketing that unless it's white on a white background, that you have a transparent logo, okay, to make it look professional. So other than that, this is a very bold design and it's a very bold property, right? So it's a very bold statement. The copy is really saying something pretty bold, right? That's some serious milk money. Like it's a little tongue in cheek, a little like bratty almost, the tone, kind of flippant about the amount of money that this property might cost. So, you know, if that's, but it's all about who you're trying to attract, right? So if it looks kind of like a bachelor pad type place to me in LA or somewhere tropical, whatever, very waterfront, obviously very expensive. So it's all about thinking who that end consumer, who that buyer might be, especially in a competitive market where you are trying to sell a property at pace for the listing price. You really need to think hard about who your buyer is. So I think that this marketing, although it's not my personal style, like this wouldn't be in my personal branding, I think that this is effective. So what type of agent within their personal branding might market it something like this? So it might be somebody who is maybe a little bit younger, right? Is kind of fresher into the industry or something, and kind of knows maybe has a good social media presence and knows that this might do well on social media, right? Because it's so simple and it's so bold. And it could be somebody that also, you know, is a little flippant, like is a little tongue in cheek, like has that kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say like frat boy personality, but that's kind of what this all is saying, right? And that's okay. Like all of this is okay as long as this is the way that you're branding yourself. So somebody that has established themselves selling horse farm properties, right, in like upstate New York or Connecticut is not going to brand their properties this way. This is not what somebody that has that background would use. So that's where this personal branding comes in, and you want it to be consistent. It's consistent with you. So it's about the property and it's about the buyer, but it's also consistent with the way that you are marketing that property to reflect your value proposition, because that's ultimately why your clients are supposed to be hiring you, right? Is because of your value proposition that you're bringing. So let's say this was being marketed by that listing agent who was a horse farm sales, you know, mainly sold horse farms, or mainly was established as, you know, maybe a very established agent that's been in the industry for a really long time. How would they market this property? I think that they would probably approach it as like, finally, you can have some peace, or like a place that's like almost like the ultimate home that you always wanted, like that kind of thing, rather than this flippant like, oh yeah, let's spend some cash on this house really quickly, right? So it's just all about your personal branding. Like you can still find the right buyer for this property, even in using your own personal tone, but it's just about utilizing your personal branding as well. And I think copy is really important with that. You know, the way that you're talking about your properties, if it's not in line with what your consumer, your client, right, your seller client is expecting from you when they hire you, then they're not going to like it, right? Like, because they're hiring you as your image, as your personal branding. And then if suddenly you turn around and give them something that's the opposite of that to market their property, they're going to be a little bit suspect and not really understand where that came from, especially if they're looking at other branding and marketing that you're doing for other properties. So you want to be consistent, okay? Consistency is important. Okay, so I hope this is helpful. I think it's fun to look at these designs. And this is why it's important to not just pick any design on that day that you really like to utilize for your property. It's actually really important to customize these and to make sure that you know what you're looking at. Like, why is it formatted this way? What do I need to do to make it personalized to me? And maybe that's just changing the photo. And for example, on this very basic for sale one, maybe it's just inserting your personal logo, inserting your photo, and changing the font and changing the photo, right? Because this is very, like, kind of as standard as it gets, right? It's just a picture with some lines. It's pretty effective communication. So this is really ripe for customizing just to be in line with your personal branding. Maybe your personal palette doesn't include red. Maybe it's like pink and blue. So changing this to pink and then changing some of this font to blue or script font, whatever you're choosing to use. So just, you can easily customize these designs like that. And these are helpful, right? Because they give you some form, but then you really do need to adjust the tone, the palette, the font, the photos like that to really be in line with your personal branding. Okay. So and then this one is the last one we'll look at, just because I think it's a good example about how photo and copy and font like work together. So if you're using this, say this is the template that you want to use, you just love the way it looks because it looks good, right? Know that you need to find a photo that's also going to work like this photo works. So see this photo, it's the rule of thirds, as we can see. This is a third, and this is a third here. The bed fits like almost perfectly in between 2/3. And the font down here, the copy, is like in the lower third, right? And in that lower third, there is a lot of negative space because it's just the white floor. So you would need to also find a photo to replace this with whatever property you're marketing that has a lot of negative space at the bottom, or maybe the photo that you have, you can use the same concept, and maybe the photo you have for your property that's the best happens to have a lot of negative space at the top, or maybe you can zoom in or crop it in a way that has a lot of negative space at the top or the bottom, and just move the copy to that section where there's the negative space. So I think that these designs are very helpful if you know these principles of design, right? You can't just adapt and plug and play without thinking about them a little bit. So that's where this type of information and learning a little bit more about graphic design and about your personal branding and about your marketing, they all come into play, and they are important because we want to be presenting ourselves as professionals with a consistent message so that we can find the consumers that we need to work with, that want to work with us, and that we want to work with, right? And so we're marketing our listings effectively. So this is all very important stuff that, as a business person, you know, you either want to learn about yourself so that you can effectively market yourself if you want to build a big business, right? Or you can leverage some of this out to someone who knows about digital marketing, graphic design, so on and so forth, and discuss with them, okay, this is my value proposition, this is how I want it communicated. Give me some examples of what designs you can present within those guidelines, and let's consistently use those. So there are a few different avenues of making this effective for you, but just know that it is valuable and it is something to pay attention to in your business. Okay, so I think that is it for today. I hope that this was helpful, and thank you so much.